Welcome to Injector Confidential, the podcast by injectors for injectors. This is Kristen.
This is Nicole, and welcome to episode 2.
We're back.
We are back, and boy, do we have a good topic for you guys today.
We're just diving in because we feel like this is where the meat of it's at.
And this is really representative of us as humans.
True.
Go straight for the uncomfortable, what everybody's thinking nobody talks about.
Yep. We hope you enjoy it. We're going to be talking a lot about how to know when it is time to quit your job.
But Kristen and I actually had a fun date on Saturday, and so we want to tell you guys about it. We had an injection party, and if you are an injector and you have a friend or even a best friend who's another injector, you know how fun this is. It's like the best day.
The best.
So what did we do for each other? Okay, so Kristen did a full face reno on me. I also sometimes feel like injectors are like bartenders. You tell them like what you like, and then they figure out the ingredients to make it happen.
Very accurate.
So I had been telling Kristen for quite some time, hey, I look like a hollow bitch. 30 has really not been kind to me. And we did like a full face reno, but with Versa back in October. And I will say, I love Versa in chin. I love it in lips. But I will say, like, my experience, tell me, Kristen, what you think. It does not last that long in the face as much as I want it to.
Yeah, you know, I'm an allergen whore. So
Oh, no, this bitch.
I love me some Voluma.
It's like, the thing is, I think about products like handbags, and you should see the look that Kristen's giving me.
I've been
Voluma?
my Forever 21, so I don't know where this analogy is going.
Voluma is like my Balenciaga Chanel option.
Okay, yeah.
Sometimes not accessible for everyone because since it lasts longer, it is usually more expensive.
Yes.
You know, we're down here in Southern California, so it's normal to have a syringe of Voluma cost $1,000.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Let that sink in. I've heard in the Bay Area that it costs $1,300 for a syringe.
That's wild.
And $22 a unit for Botox.
Oh my God, that is wild.
And in New York, that's how much it costs too.
I mean, more power to them.
You guys, you should DM us and tell us how much a unit of Botox is in your city and a syringe of Voluma.
Yes. I'll put like a story on on our Insta story.
We got to know.
Because we have to know.
And then we'll report back. But anyways, I digress. So we did some medial cheek for me because my lateral cheek, I have about a year-old Voluma in each side, was still looking good. So we did some medial cheek. We did tear troughs because finally my cheeks were supported, and we did chin, and we dissolved my upper lip because I had some filler mustache.
But please do not forget about our Puriform experience.
Oh, and then of course we hit the Puriform. You guys, Kristen and I love Puriform. It's definitely a butt clencher of an injection, and this is why.
Yeah, because as I'm doing my thing, thank God I aspirated. Total positive aspiration, and we put it on our
It wasn't even at first.
Yeah, it was like a delayed, and what's funny, I told Nicole, I just had a gut feeling, and I don't know if it was the way that the needle felt, even though I was like on bone, there was something in me that told me to wait, and for good reason, and that could have ended so differently.
It's so true. But then the other thing that it's kind of, you got to take this with a grain of salt, but with patients, I tell them with Puriform, I'm like, if it hurts, you need to tell me. Because honestly, if you do Puriform correctly and you're not in a vein, the initial poke feels weird, like popping a zit, but having the bone on, having it on periosteum does not feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there was truly a difference between when she aspirated back, which it was like 6 seconds later.
Yeah.
Like maybe even 10.
Yeah.
And it didn't hurt at all once it was in the right spot. So, if you aspirate back blood and you get a flashback, that's actually a really good sign.
Yeah, it means we're like doing our job right. I was telling my patients afterwards when we posted on our stories was that like, this is why you pay more to see me instead of going to Groupon injectors and that kind of thing. Like, this is why we are top tier.
And then my pearls for Puriform are fresh needle, 1, 2, unprimed needle, and 3, it's easier to aspirate back when the syringe isn't full.
Oh, so what do you do if your syringe is full?
I just try to avoid it like the plague, but then I can't one-handed aspiration. I really okay, so Kristen's left-handed, I'm right-handed. So we'll also give pearls at some point about injecting with the left hand, but I do everything two-handed. Like my left hand, I feel is smarter than my right hand because all my right hand is doing is pushing and pulling. But I like to nursing school Z-track.
Okay.
The arteries out of the way and guard where the injection is going. So I like to do that with my left hand, but I'm a one-handed aspiration gal for the most part.
Which I envy. I have yet to get to that level in my skills.
With a full syringe, though, it is hard.
Yeah, I bet. Because of the length of just trying to get that pullback.
Right. I'm a little swollen, but otherwise I'm looking flat.
You look
thanks to her.
fabulous.
My mustache is gone.
Yes, that does the Hylenex and the upper lip, man. I mean, and Nicole said it earlier to me. It's you cannot fix filler with filler, and that is like something that's not only important to remember for our patients, but for ourselves when we're, because we are our own advertisement. So we want to make sure the appearance reflects the values in which we inject.
After we got done with mine, we did PRF hair restoration for Kristen because she's had some hair loss since she had COVID. She's had COVID twice now.
Ah, God.
Did you see the hair loss after the second round of COVID?
No, it's been after the first. All of my long haul COVID symptoms were after the first, and it's been over a year.
Yeah. So we decided, I was like, yo, let's do some PRF hair restoration. I used to work in peds, so I feel like I'm pretty good at phlebotomy, not IVs. Not with IVs. Don't get started on that. I can't thread a catheter, but I feel like I can poke somebody pretty good with a butterfly. Kristen sits down in the chair and she tells me, so this usually is pretty hard for them. And I was like, bitch, you waited to tell me until now? And I'm like, whatever, it's fine. Throw on the tourniquet. Nothing. This bitch has no blood.
It probably doesn't help that all I drink is iced coffee and Diet Coke, and that a little bit of blood we did get was foamy. Nicole said. So I don't know
what that means.
I will post a follow-up when I see my doctor.
I'm like, I think you need a CBC. I think you need a CBC and a BNP. I don't know what's going on with you. But I had to poke her 4 times. And usually I have a 3 poke max because by the second poke, I'm already getting a little flustered. I wasn't flustered. I was just on my knees begging her veins to cooperate.
Yeah. And I was like, bitch, you're going to get it. So keep going.
And then we did a full face of Botox for her, which was my favorite. So fun. So 130 units.
We did.
Let's list out what we did.
Yeah. Forehead, glabella, crows, of course. Bunnies. We did DAOs, chin, platysmal bands, necklace lines.
So I'm sitting next to Kristen, just staring at her forehead, waiting for that Bobo to kick in.
I need a toasted hamburger out of a forehead.
Well, I am CEO of that. We all know that. So, Kristen, what have you done this week so far? What have your patients been heavy on?
So I've actually been doing a lot of PRF lately, which I am since joining Portrait, that's a newer thing. I did a lot of PRP with microneedling.
Same.
But I have been heavy on the PRF, a lot of PRF under eyes, hair restoration, and I am here for it. My patients have been I have this one patient who's just been dealing with some hormonal stuff, and she's getting the internal stuff figured out, but now we're hitting it hard with PRF, and she just came in for her 3rd session, and the amount of hair growth has been insane.
It's like fertilizer.
I'm so impressed, and I'm so excited for myself, especially since it's not just hormonal with me. It's really post-COVID. I'm really hoping this is a great option for my patients that are dealing with the same thing. But
yeah, we'll keep you guys posted with 3 sessions, 4 to 6 weeks apart for Kristen. Hopefully next time she hydrates.
Yeah, lesson learned. What about you, Nicole? What have you been heavy on?
I'm having the best kind of week, a Botox Dysport heavy week. One of my favorites, with a good mix, I'd say 50% new, 50% existing. Just
awesome.
I love that. Yeah.
So, okay. So do you, and I know you're a Dysport gal.
Yes.
So what would you say your percentage of Dysport to Botox is?
Oh, well, actually I'm a weirdo. So there's a small bit of research. People will come for me about this, but there's a small bit of research that says the best way to prevent antibody resistance is by switching up back and forth.
And how often?
So guys, I'm a Dysport whore. I also am so impatient that if I do Botox, I sit in front of the mirror for 5 days and I'm like, where is it? Where is it? So I love that Dysport kicks in quick. It's the first one that I started with. It's what I trained on. So I think Dysport will always have my heart. But for every 2 rounds of Dysport, I'll do a round of Botox in between.
Okay.
I think if I switching up your workout, keep those muscles guessing. But so I'd say probably it ends up being 70-30, 70% Dysport, 30% Botox. But I really tell people it achieves the same result, right?
Totally.
Generally about the same price.
Yeah. And do you notice that do you run into patients that are having resistance issues?
Only if they've been dosing really close together for years, 60 days apart. The second they see a movement, then their injectors, let's do some more. But sometimes because I'm a nerd, add a touch up. If it's outside the 2 weeks and they got Botox, I'll do Dysport.
Oh.
Yeah, if they have like a sassy brow or something, just because I'm like, oh, let's switch it up. Let's surprise that immune system.
Yeah.
So
Take them off guard.
I know, but if you use just one or the other, it's totally fine. But I think now, since I switched to portrait, the option to carry Botox, Dysport, and Xeomin, honestly, I've never used Xeomin.
Yeah, same. I know I need to like branch out with that one, but I do just feel like I have all the tools in my tool belt that I need at this point between Dysport and Botox. And if you use Xeomin, we would love to know.
Let's make a story about it.
Yeah.
Tell us why you love it.
Why?
And that's not a test. I just legitimately want to know.
Absolutely. Because there's several portrait providers who are like heavy on the Xeomin. And so I would love to know. What would you say your average dose per patient is on Botox?
Okay, so Botox units, I would say my goal dose for people is like 45 units if we're treating all 3 areas. I have a new saying. It's called "You're 50 until you're not."
Yep. Totally agree with that.
So I think that because most people need 20 in their glabella, at least 10 in their forehead, and then at least 15 in your crow's.
Yeah, totally. When my first job as an injector was with the plastic surgery office. So some of you may know that I've worked plastics with breast implants. With Allergan breast implants, you get 50 units of Nitrile Botox.
Whoa, back up.
You didn't know that? No. Oh my gosh, like they're huge.
Dysport whore. I don't know these Allergan intermarkets.
Yeah.
Ones?
The gummy, the Nitrile implants. So you get 50 units of Botox for you and a friend.
Oh, okay.
So I used to love doing those patients because it's like everybody really can use 50 units.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
That's
so you're giving them a taste of the good life with the 50 units. And there was no convincing them from that point on. We all know what 50 units can do for someone. So they ended up being really loyal clients for me. And I didn't have to convince them that even though their friend got 15 for their whole face and it lasted a year, we all have those
witchcraft.
patients. Yeah. I got to just show them the full effect of Botox straight away, and it was glorious.
That's amazing. What a great idea. I'm not over these Allergan implants.
Yeah.
Are they popular?
I've got them myself.
Oh, you have some Nitrile?
I've got the gummy implants.
Okay, I did see this on TikTok where they have a stiletto and they put it into the gummy and it doesn't burst.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I worked a lot of intra-op stuff in plastics, and I've seen, that's another topic, but definitely I've seen a lot of mentor implants and that kind of thing. And I just, seems like overall the results and the client satisfaction with Allergan implants was pretty high.
She continues on the Allergan train.
I know, guys.
She'll take it until
I will take it to my grave.
I'll just take it to her grave
with my implants,
with your Nitriles in your chest, literally across your chest. But one thing that Kristen told me one time that I think is such a good thing to say for somebody who's hesitant about the number of units, tell them, just try it just one time. Try it one time. And if you hate it, I'll comp an area for you next time.
Yep.
Plot twist. They never hate it. Nope. They love it every time. And they're like, I'm so glad that I trusted you.
Absolutely.
So that's our little take home. But yeah, you're 50 until you're not.
That's right. If you learn anything from this episode,
you're 50 until you're not. And Nitrile implants and Allergan makes implants. That's right.
We're off to a strong start here.
Okay, so on to the meat and potatoes. Okay, so this episode is all about when it's time to quit your job. So first of all, you're here. So if you're listening to this, that alone might be a pretty good indication of if it's time to go. And, we're going to talk a lot about intuition, but I think you have to trust your gut on these things. Like, our gut tells us things. It's an actually like evidence-based thing, is that your intuition will tell you every single time. But we've compiled a list, so we're going to take you guys through it. So one of the first ones is a big one, at least for me, is that you're no longer learning. And it's that stagnant culture is just non-negotiable for me. I need to be challenged all the time. But there's a lack of training opportunities. Training is one of the things I think that gets honed in on and gets harped on for people with their jobs, is they're like, I want trainings. I want Allergan trainings. I want Galderma trainings. We all want trainings, right? Because that's the best way to get hands-on. Realistically, you can't expect to have trainings every single month. But if you're not getting any and you want to be learning and you're asking for them and you're getting empty promises or not getting anything at all, that is something, it's just data. All of this is data to put in your pocket, remember it, and then use it to make a decision later on. Use that data. But if that is a big core value for you, is to continue learning, and even not in a training, if you say, hey, can I shadow someone else from a different practice? And your boss says, absolutely not. Or, hey, can I shadow you? And they say no, or you don't like what you see, then That's a big one, I think.
Totally. I think that's a really excellent point of writing down what are your core values as an injector. And like you said too, is like everything is data. There may not be anything on this list that we're about to go over that in and of itself would be a deal breaker for you, but maybe the culmination of certain things. Yeah, for me, like personal experience with training, I've worked now 3 different places as an injector. One place basically was kind of like, hey, that's a waste of time. I know what goes on. It's like they didn't like the rep based ones. But sometimes those are like, yeah, even though things are on label, like sometimes those are the best way to build connection, build, a network and learn. And then, I mean, I can speak for Portrait right now. Like I've done more trainings with
We are
Portrait.
blessed
Oh
with
my
trainings.
gosh.
My first month I did 3.
Yeah. And with like stellar, not only just like the reps that bring in, but like we train with each other, other injectors, which is invaluable, or like getting to go with oculoplastic surgeon in LA, Dr. Barbarino, who like taught us PDO threads. And I mean, just so much advanced stuff that like, and then we can choose which of that we incorporate into our own practice. But I mean, the idea is that being stagnant that's a deal breaker, I think, in this industry. It just has to be.
Yeah, it has to be. Kristen and I have done most of our trainings together because we're codependent.
Maybe another episode.
Maybe another episode, anxious attachment and codependency in the workplace.
All that to say, if you are in a position at your practice where you are not being given the opportunities to grow, or it's somehow frowned upon, in my experience, when training opportunities are not given, it's not because they don't have the resources, it's because they want to keep you small. Or
it's not a priority.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know that this industry is always changing. It's always growing. You have to be on top of your practice. So our next one is that you don't feel safe. And I'm going to break this down into 2 different categories. So the first one be in practice. And this kind of goes along a bit with what we were seeing in the training, but do you feel safe with what you practice? Are you being asked to practice things that are outside your scope? Have you been given the training to be a safe injector? Is your medical director there and ready and willing to help you in an emergency? Do you have the supplies necessary? I've heard of a lot of injectors saying that they have been worked at places where they'll only keep 2 or 3 vials of Hylenex.
What?
Yeah. And
ideally, aren't you supposed to have 20?
Yeah. Yeah. And with no real protocols listed out on as far as like the most up-to-date literature on occlusions, I think that that's a huge one. If you don't feel safe in your practice, not only is that going to take a toll on you day to day, but like you have a license to protect. And unfortunately, this is, no matter how you look at it, there is the potential for litigation in these things. And Nicole and I are going to talk at some point about our own like legal stuff that we've had to navigate in this industry. But legalities and malpractice, as much as it's anxiety producing, needs to be at the forefront of your mind. So keep that in mind when you think about how safe your place is.
And everybody wants to say that'll never happen to me.
Yeah.
But it will.
And it's just a matter of when, not if you're doing this long enough and you see the volume of patients that I'm sure the majority of you do see. It's just, we're human.
Yeah,
stuff's going to happen. The other aspect of this is emotionally safe. Now, when we were talking about who's going to talk about what for this podcast episode, Nicole said anything with feelings I get to talk about. So you'll notice a theme in our episodes is that I'm definitely the like touchy-feely.
Kristen is my therapist. Like when she said in the last episode, she's like, well, I thought I'd be a therapist. And I was thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, bitch, you did.
Bitch, you is a therapist. So what that looks like is you should feel safe in your environment. You should feel safe that you are not walking into an office that is toxic, whether that's mean girl culture, whether that's the ability to receive and give constructive criticism to your coworkers. You need to feel that you, at the very least, have your humanity acknowledged. And not to mention the fact that you are a goddamn professional and should be spoken to and treated as one. I can say that most places I've worked there's been that level of, just common decency, but I've also worked in an environment where that wasn't there. And it is soul-sucking, no matter how much you love your job. If you are not in a place where you can emotionally or mentally feel safe, you will not grow. And I think that's so important to understand and to recognize, and maybe start to dive into how are you feeling in your environment? I think we wake up and we get into the grind and we don't acknowledge maybe how certain things actually affect us. And so I would encourage you to reflect upon that.
And then we go into the hard feelings. And I think there's a theme, like nice inner workings. That's Kristen. And then there's like hard confrontation. I don't like this. That's me. That's Nicole for you.
Which I'm not. I'm working on.
No. You're actually a lot better at it than you give yourself credit.
Oh.
But I was born this way. What can I say? Another big one that came really like when I was writing things down is, do you respect your boss? And do you like them as a person? You don't need to be best friends with your boss. You absolutely do not need to hang out with them. You don't need to braid each other's hair and watch American Idol. You don't have to. You need to like them as a person and respect them. If you don't, you need to examine why. So is it the business practices? Do you see what's going on behind the scenes and you don't like it? Are there some shady practices? I can talk a lot about this, but are people not being treated or patients not being treated the way that they deserve to be? Is there talking behind the back? I mean, it's things as simple as, are they respecting HIPAA? Also pay attention to whoever is your supervisor, whoever is your medical director, who's running your business. Where are they focusing their energy? And who are they focusing their energy on? And Kristen and I can both speak to this, but there are some places where they focus their energy not so much on their staff, but growing their image and maybe attracting influencers.
Yeah.
And if you're into that and that's your niche, great. And if you're good at it, that's awesome. I'm not good at that.
No.
And it's not my passion. But if that's not in alignment with what you want to do and the kind of the population that you want to attract and the clients that you want to attract, then you need to examine that. And the other big thing too is like moral conflicts, just doing the right thing. If you are an extremely honest person and you feel like you haven't been able to be truly authentic in your practice because your boss wants you to be a certain way or wants you to talk a certain way with patients, then take note of that as well. And the big one, micromanaging, lack of autonomy, especially as an advanced practice provider, as a PA, NP, MD, there's no hierarchy when it comes to respect. But if you've done that additional training, you have earned the right to have some autonomy.
Absolutely.
And not so much just standardized procedures, but be able to make decisions on your own and write prescriptions within a certain scope, right? And not have to answer constantly to your medical director. It should be a really symbiotic, like cohesive relationship where you guys are equals, not one or the other. And, you know, the advanced practice provider being the medical director's bitch, essentially.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, at least in my experience, a lot of times the medical director is somewhat removed.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're either in surgery or, you know, they're working more on the business end, and they're not like hands-on with the patient in the same way that you are. And you need to, after doing this for a while and learning about your patients and your ideal client and the type of patient that you attract, you know what's best for them. You know what's best to grow your practice, what's best to maintain relationships. And I think that it's really important to work in an environment where that is valued and that you're trusted as a provider, not only just practically on, you know, do you know how to inject certain ways, but do you know how to care for the patient in a way that makes them feel safe and makes them want to have loyalty towards the practice and towards your treatment offerings, I think is huge.
And some of this micromanaging comes with a gray area, because I had an injector one time say, my medical director just micromanages the shit out of me. He checks my charting. And okay, let's take this two ways. First of all, me being a nerd, chart auditing is actually a thing. It's very important to make sure that everybody is charting in a way that covers you legally, but also in a way that's complete, annotated thoroughly, and, you know, really details the procedure from top to bottom. And my response to that is, yes, that might seem a little invasive because it's your client, but also it's documentation. And in the hospital, we used to have chart audits all the time and nobody cared about that. People were just like, yo, I don't want to be on the auditing team because that sounds boring. So
Totally.
while it might sound micromanaging, just always think, is this happening for a bigger litigious or business practice reason?
And is there something to learn here?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
not every like ounce of micromanaging is bad, but I think is it balanced with that trust factor?
Right. Is that person saying, well, you can do better and I want to show you why,
Mhm.
rather than see all the things you're doing wrong? Yeah.
Mhm.
Different vibe.
Mhm.
And the other thing too, I think this freaks out a lot of people is, are you having communication problems with your boss? And
Mhm.
more than, are you afraid to talk to them? Because a lot of us, especially as new injectors, can feel overwhelmed going to our medical directors or our bosses. But do you feel like you could go to them with a concern? Do you feel like you could ask them for advice about a difficult patient? And what if you made a mistake? Do you feel like you could go to them without judgment and say, I made a mistake and I need help?
Mm.
Can you go without feeling like you're going to be punished or have it held against you in the long run? And when I thought about that in my past jobs, it like really hit me in my stomach when I thought
Mm.
about that, because in the truth of it, maybe it was partially me feeling afraid to go to the medical director, go to my supervisor. But if you truly don't feel safe, eventually something bad is going to happen just by the laws of the universe. And you're going to have to deal with that situation. And it may not end the way that you want it to.
Absolutely.
And also
Absolutely.
chart up the yin yang if that
Yeah.
happens.
Yes. I've been super like I've worked in all kinds of different environments, and as far as like the workplace feel goes, and despite all of the faults of the places that I worked at before and maybe things I didn't agree with and all of that, I have been very fortunate that every medical director I've had has been very approachable when it
Oh, that's
comes to
awesome.
making a mistake,
Oh,
which I
that's
think is,
awesome.
or if they like sense that I truly do need them,
Mhm.
they have been there in a pinch, which I'm like, I think as an injector or as a new injector was just starting out when I was like, that was invaluable.
Yeah, I haven't had that experience always.
Yeah, which like, yeah, but it's
I
like,
feel
that's
like
why
that's
we're
the norm.
here.
I feel
Like
like that's more so the
100%.
norm. But
Totally.
I'm glad you had a good experience. Happy
Yeah,
for
thank
you.
God.
And then the next item that we landed on is that you aren't valued. And being valued comes through in many ways, tangible and non-tangible. So the first one I thought of is you don't receive feedback. And I'm not talking about negative feedback. I'm talking about positive feedback too. Because if you don't know what you're doing right or wrong, what are you doing?
Totally.
And that also might mean that your employer just literally isn't watching and maybe they don't care. And another one that is so simple is, are you appreciated?
Mm.
Appreciation goes so far. And I'm not talking a cold pizza in the break room, but does somebody say, hey, I know that you saw 20 patients today and you did awesome. I just want to let you know that I really see your effort. Or I don't know. There's just so many. I mean, I don't want it to go hammer too hard on Portrait, but they go out of their way to make us feel
Mhm.
appreciated in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
And it's really changed the way that I treat my clients, the way that I see my colleagues, is because I feel like I'm valued.
Absolutely. You feel like like the way that I would think of it when I was like contemplating on should I leave the job that I was at was if I took a leave of absence, would I even be missed? I mean, yes, of course, like by my patients I would be. Of course it would be inconvenient because they're having to mess my schedule around, but is who I am as a person like able to make actual impact where I'm working, and is it recognized? Are my strengths and the things that I bring to the table actually valued here? And when it was pretty like quickly it came to my mind, like, no, I don't think that's the case. It was like, all right, like for me, that was the deal breaker.
Yeah, that's just so sad. I remember that the feedback that I used to get was purely in like syringe numbers and units and how many patients you saw. And
Yeah.
you had a great month as far as revenue. Okay, but what about my mental health? Because I was crying in between patients. You know what I mean?
Totally.
That the normal thing is like, hey, you had a really high volume month. How are you feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we'll talk more about pay in the next item too. But if your pay doesn't reflect your value, so everybody deserves to be paid a fair wage. You should be able to live on an injecting salary. Unfortunately, most of us take a pay cut when we leave the hospital because we're no longer protected by a union and we're starting from the bottom again. I wish it was different, but it will probably take a long time to change.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, if you are a nurse injector and you go back to school and you finish your master's, your PA, whatever, your nurse practitioner, you come back and you say, I have advanced training that will make me safer, make me more autonomous, make me give you less liability. I should be paid more for that.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you are also doing GFEs and writing prescriptions for other providers within your space, you need to be compensated for that. And if somebody says no, that is a big, big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the center red flag in the bouquet of red flags for me as an advanced practice provider. On the topic of pay and earning potential, If there is a cap or a ceiling to your earning potential, take major note of it, because you should not have to work a second job to survive as an injector.
Mm-hmm.
So many people that I know have worked 2 jobs because they loved what they did, but it cheapens your practice almost.
Oh, totally. Totally. My first job, I was hourly. I made $20 less than what I made in the hospital. But, I was willing to do it because I was like so desperate to get into the industry.
And then work for free.
Yeah. And then 4 years later, I was like, well, wait a second. I feel like my pay should have evolved with my practice, but unfortunately it didn't. But I think, if you're being paid hourly, like for me, I was hourly, no commission. And so it was like, there's only so many hours in the week,
Right.
that talk about a cap. And no talk of a commission structure was difficult.
And having worked only commission, in my experience, it's that once I was getting prepared to graduate from my doctorate, I started thinking, okay, I'm going to be injecting more. I was thinking about low volume months. We all have those. Like for me, we'll talk about that in a future episode. But for me, like December is always rough.
Mm-hmm.
Late cancellations. And I feel like a lot of injectors feel this way. But I thought about how I was going to have to get a second job. And I was like applying for jobs in derm and plastic surgery part-time
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, I need something else in case I can't make ends meet. I mean, I've got my loans to pay. I've got a life. I live in Southern California. It ain't cheap. And that was also one of my aha moments where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have to work a second job. So you should not have to work a second job unless you want to as an injector.
Totally. I completely agree. And now with that, what if some of you guys are doing that right
Mhm.
now, what you may be starting to feel, and what we're going to talk about next is psychological signs of burnout. So most of the time, you're going to have that intuitive sense of what burnout looks like for you. Maybe it's, just exhausted. You don't want to go to work anymore. You just don't enjoy what you do. I mean, for everybody, it's a little bit different, but there are 3 main components of burnout. The first one is emotional exhaustion. This can come from the fatigue of just carrying too much for too long. Maybe you are just burned out on the number of clients you're seeing, on just your relationship with your medical director or your staff. The second thing can be depersonalization. This is the depletion of empathy, caring, and compassion. So what that may look like is a patient comes in and they're unhappy with their treatment, or they just legitimately have questions. And maybe if you weren't in a state of burnout, you could have met them in that space and, in a non-defensive way, talk to them about what their concerns are and really address what it is and fix it. And you have a happy, loyal customer. But when you're burned out, you lose that empathy piece and you are no longer able to meet them in that vulnerable space that they are in, but you have your defenses up. And all that's going to do is create an environment of distrust between you and your patient. The next thing would be decreased sense of accomplishment. It's an unconquerable sense of utility or feeling that nothing you do makes a difference. I know that.
God.
I know that sounds like really dark, but I think
It's so real,
but you feel it. I'm sure if you're feeling this right now, those words cut like a knife.
Or if you've ever felt that way, like for me.
Yeah, it's just like, oof, you know what it's like to hit that wall of futility. And if
That's like the final straw effect.
not freaking sustainable.
Yeah.
And like, you deserve better. Like, besides just your qualifications as an injector, you as a person do not need to feel burned out. So what's the cure? So I'm going to list this book in the show notes for you, but Emily Nagoski has a book called Burnout. Highly recommend it. I love listening to it on Audible. So good. She talks about how the antidote to burnout is not self-care, which is so interesting because I feel like in the wellness space, that's sort of like this trendy thing that kind of gets thrown at us quite a bit is, oh, well, if, prevent burnout, just do self-care, and that's great. And if that's what works for you, awesome. But I think it also, too, adds a check mark to the list of things that we now have a potential to fail at one more thing. Like for me, I, love to do my morning routine, but if I don't get to it, I feel like I suck. And so that can add to the sense of burnout. So what's interesting is that the antidote to burnout is actually all of us caring for each other, which I thought was so beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
And just so much a reason why we are wanting to bring this podcast, because that's what we're trying to do, even if it's virtually and it's from a distance, like bringing that space where you can feel cared for. Now, it's part of that is that there's a noticing when someone else is stuck, but then there's also the component of noticing when you feel stuck, when you feel like you are no longer resourced to handle what's being thrown at you day in and day out. And that's going to take some self-reflection. And that's the thing that you guys are going to see with a lot of these topics that we discuss. Yes, we'll give you some really practical ways of, okay, here's how to beat burnout, that kind of thing. But it's always going to fall back onto, are you willing to do the inner work also? And I think that the most successful injectors and the ones with the best practices are the ones that have done the inner work. And this is just such a huge component of that, because you are worth more than what you're currently experiencing. And yeah.
Can I get a hell yeah? Can I get a hallelujah? That is just the truth, man.
But we're so excited to walk this journey with you. And I think maybe to wrap it up, if any of this resonated with you, I think maybe we can each kind of give our own take on what now. What do you do? You've checked all the boxes on this list that we've given you. You realize, yeah, hell yeah, I need to quit my job, but I am the breadwinner of my family, or I haven't been experienced long enough, or whatever you think the issue is. Maybe, Nicole, like, what would you say to a listener right now if they were like, yes, I want to quit my job, but I don't know what to do?
So what I would say is, my boyfriend told me, and he's like an encyclopedia of good knowledge that I never have. And so shout out to Isaiah. But when I was getting started into my injecting space, he told me to get a board of directors. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can't pay people. And then what he meant is like more of a metaphorical of people who you really respect their opinion, and they maybe don't work in the same space as you. But my number one person that came to mind, I thought to myself, I was like, I'm ready to quit my job, but I don't know how to do it. I need some advice. I haven't done this in a small business before. I've only worked for big corporations. Trust me, in a big corporation says, I've got no problem quitting a job. I can do it. But when you feel like you're screwing people over, that's when it gets really hard. So the first thing I did was reach out to somebody, a business owner I really admired. And so that's my friend Bree. She owns her own brow studio. And so I reached out to her for advice. And
Love that.
yeah, and leaning on somebody, and actually then you feel less alone, because I worked in more of like a silo when I was like in my first couple injecting jobs. I felt really alone. I didn't have a community of people. So it's okay to reach out. And also, of course, I'm always going to plug therapy, but you can also role play with the therapist too, and they can give you really good ways to, approach this, get yourself prepared for what the outcome might be. But also a really good friend who works in small biz, or I call it the glam industry, like somebody who's a hairdresser, lash artist. They're going to give you really valuable insight, because maybe they've quit a job before and it's gone horribly, and they can give you insight into that. So that's the first thing that I would do. Bree really was a huge help.
Oh, I love that. I love the board of directors idea.
Yes. Oh, in case you're wondering, you're on my board of directors.
Yes.
Yeah, what would you do?
So what my advice would be is similar very much. So I think what I would do is I would write out, okay, what are my non-negotiables? Like, where am I no longer willing to accept things that no longer serve me in a job? And write those out, and then really try to decide, like, is that something, are these tangible things that I can present to my current boss and say, hey, I feel like these, whether it's pay or whatever, you could come to them and say, these are things I'm willing to stay if these things change, to just really write it down. What is it you're looking for? And then if it turns out that either they're not willing to accept that, or you just don't think it will be possible to find that in your job, I would say, one, I'm a little on the woo-woo side, but I would start looking for what I call expanders, which is who in your life, or who on social media, or who in the industry has the job and the work-life balance and all of that you would want, who has the
something that's like
Instagram
aspirational for you.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you have this like expander, like, so that you know that these things exist, that these types of jobs, this work-life balance, all of that exists. And then I would say, just with that list in mind and with your expanders, just start putting yourself out there, which I know is like the hardest part. Oh. It sucks to it's
very
so vulnerable.
Yeah,
it
very
is.
vulnerable.
But then honestly, consider entrepreneurship, which I know is so hard to
You can do it. Everybody that is an entrepreneur, always thought, maybe someday I'll start my own business. No, you start your own business when you don't feel ready for it.
Yeah, because it's like being a parent. No matter when I chose to have my children, I could have never been ready for Silas Dozy, my little guy. They're sweet. Oh, no way. And so, but you jump in and you do it. And now, like, here I am several months in with Portrait, and I'm like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I would have never done it if I wasn't kicked out of the nest. And
The
yeah,
best things happen from a time when you do not feel prepared and you feel like your life's going to fall apart.
absolutely. And so if you're listening to this episode and you're like, check, 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 I think I'm ready to quit my job. Don't walk away from this discouraged. Walk away feeling encouraged to know, like, better things are coming. And
It takes a lot of strength to know when something's not right for
Mhm.
you. It's way easier to stay in something that's easy
and comfortable.
and comfortable, but it takes a lot of strength to realize when, hey, this ain't it.
Yeah, because even in our, like, most difficult jobs, there is a comfort there that we settle for.
Yep.
And the other piece of advice along the therapy route that Nicole was talking about, start diving into those limiting beliefs. So what has made you willing to stay in this environment? There is something there that has served a purpose for you in a way that's made it so you were willing to stay in an uncomfortable and
Like in a
toxic
protective way?
environment. Yeah.
Okay.
So figure out what that is. What are you afraid to jump into or back away from? And our biggest encouragement is that you can do it, and reach out to us on Instagram if you need further encouragement, because we have been there. And the biggest thing I can say is that you are worth more than wondering if you should quit your job. Like, you are worth success and freedom and to feel a sense of flow in your work. And we believe in you.
100%. And if you quit your job, please DM us so then we can say, you go, girl. We want to
Yes.
celebrate that. It's such a big win. Even if you have no idea what your next move is, like, we want to celebrate that just as much as getting a job, starting a business.
Absolutely.
Closing one chapter is just the start of another, and we want to recognize that. So let us know. But we hope you enjoyed this. Yeah.
Yes.
You learned a thing or two. Once again, this is your aesthetic safe space, so feel free to reach out. We love hearing from you guys on Instagram, and we'll see you next week.
Can't wait. Have a great week, guys.